World of Warcraft is almost universally recognized as the genre-defining game when it comes to MMORPGs. It's a cultural keystone when we talk about online gaming, and if you've played it for any extended period of time, you probably already understand why it's had such a lasting impact. It's fair to say that WoW's had its ups and downs over the years, but regardless of that, it's the game that got me and millions of other players around the world addicted to MMOs, and for that, it'll always hold a special place in my heart. In recent years, it hasn't been my primary MMO. Yes, I am a crazy person who plays up to 3 MMOs concurrently, but since the Legion expansion, I think 8 years ago, I've rarely gone more than a few months without logging into some version of WoW. That being said, recent years have been a mixed bag when it comes to the game's success. The Shadowlands expansion, for example, is pretty much universally agreed upon as the worst expansion in the game's history. There are plenty of other videos out there that do a great job dismantling the narrative and game design choices that made Shadowlands so despised, so I'll just leave it at that. Classic WoW, on the other hand, has brought back a version of the game that most thought was ancient history, and it's been one of the most well-received decisions Blizzard has made in years. Let's just say if it wasn't for Classic WoW, I think Shadowlands would have finally done the job that no other WoW killer could. So anyway, why am I making this video? To explain my pale complexion and aversion to touching grass? Well, in a way yes, but more importantly, it's to say that World of Warcraft in 2025 has a totally different vibe compared to just a few short years ago. I've been spending more and more time in Azeroth lately, and for the first time in years, WoW has retaken the top spot as my primary game. It's come a long way since its lowest point, and Blizzard's new attitude is a breath of fresh air and a big step in the right direction. It feels like the devs pulled the game out of its nosedive, hopped in the kitchen, and started cooking. Their efforts have been paying off big time with all the different experimental versions of the game, from Plunderstorm in retail to Season of Discovery in Classic. There's plenty of new stuff that's been a lot of fun to play that the old Blizzard would never have even considered making. Look, no one wants to invest the kind of time and effort an MMO entails if the game doesn't have a promising future, but I can say at this point that I'm confident WoW will not only continue on for years to come, but I think it has the potential to once again sit comfortably at the top as the king of the MMOs. So if you've played WoW in the past and you're wondering, is it worth giving the game another try? My emphatic answer is yes, I would recommend it. But I understand if you still have doubts. Time and again, content creators big and small proclaim the latest patch or latest expansion to be the one that saves WoW and finally makes it great again. This time really does feel different though, so allow me to lay out a few reasons why WoW is still worth your time now and into the future. First, a lot of effort has been put towards giving the players interesting, fun, and most importantly optional, things to do in retail WoW. There's a lot of content to check out beyond just Mythic Plus and raiding. New experimental game modes such as Plunderstorm, a pirate-themed battle royale, and expansion-themed remixes have been introduced to spice things up. New systems like the monthly trading post are practically handing out top-notch, dare I say cash shop quality mounts and transmog pieces in exchange for a currency earned just by playing the game. Speaking of transmog, Blizzard's art team has been absolutely killing it lately. Transmog has gotten so much more variety. Whether you want to dress up like Sylvanas Windrunner or a freaking Ninja Turtle, it's entirely up to you. Don't have time to join a weekly heroic or mythic raid team but still want to feel meaningful gear progression? Well, there's always Mythic Plus, or if you don't feel like doing that, WoW's latest expansion, The War Within, introduced a new type of PvE content that I've become a huge fan of, Delves. Delves are like the love child of dungeons and single-player scenarios. You can choose to do them with a group or just hop in by yourself. Even if you opt to do them solo, an NPC ally, Bran Bronzebeard, will accompany you in the role of tank, DPS, or healer to assist with one of the roles that you're missing as a solo player. You can progress through 11 levels of difficulty, and completing Delves will count towards unlocking a weekly reward in your Great Vault. Every day, a new grouping of these delves will be classified as bountiful, meaning that they have enhanced rewards for completing them, and now in the latest patch, delves can be overcharged as well to offer even more rewards for completing them. I'm not trying to go into a deep dive on delves here, but hopefully you get the gist of it. If I had to explain how it feels to play them, I would say they feel like mini Mythic Plus dungeons without the timer or without stacking affixes. Even if you prefer to focus on raids or Mythic Plus, delves are a great option to have around for quickly gearing up an alt or just giving yourself something fun to do when your normal group of friends isn't available. With the increasing number of solo MMO players out there, it's great to see this kind of casual focused content that doesn't require other players to do. Don't get me wrong, I still think most MMOs are at their best when you're part of a guild or group of friends, but the reality is what it is, and having a viable progression path for casual players is important for a modern MMO. Speaking of features that are important in modern MMOs, one of the longest requested features from the fanbase is getting added to retail WoW with the upcoming Midnight expansion, and that feature is housing. The other two MMOs I've personally spent a significant amount of time in are the Elder Scrolls Online and Final Fantasy XIV, both of which have amazing housing systems. And because both of those games have amazing housing systems, I'm confident that WoW's housing is going to be at least as good, if not better, than both. Let me explain. Over the years, Blizzard has gotten a reputation for taking inspiration from systems or concepts in other games and making them their own, often greatly improving that feature. WoW's housing looks absolutely amazing from what we've seen so far, and this first iteration is just laying the groundwork for the future. The first housing neighborhoods are going to be limited to Stormwind and Orgrimmar, but the devs have already expressed plans to expand housing to other locations across existing areas of the game. Furniture for the house can be crafted by professions from all the different expansions, and it looks like furniture patterns and items will be added to the loot tables of older content as well, making the whole world of Azeroth much more relevant again, beyond just farming for transmog or achievement hunting. This is a whole new pillar of gameplay that players will be able to interact with as much or as little as they choose. One of the things I heard them say in an interview that I thought was especially neat is that they want to add a feature so that, let's say you do a quest for a merchant somewhere out in the world. He might show up in your neighborhood sometime later to say hello and maybe give you a follow-up quest or an additional reward. It's not a huge deal, but little things like this go a long way to make the world feel more alive. When we talk about retail WoW, that really feels like the core of what makes me hopeful for the future, bringing the whole world of Azeroth together again. In the past, the design of WoW was that each expansion was essentially its own separate game, sectioned off from the rest of the world, and once you move on from one area, you don't really go back to it. And if you do, it's stuck at that specific point on the timeline. Other games have learned from WoW's mistakes and had the foresight to have a more global approach to their world building and expansions. WoW never really did that after vanilla, and I think that's what's made it always feel like we're going to run out of new places to go, or that eventually new locations will feel bloated and forced. Not to say that current WoW doesn't kind of feel that way sometimes, but the modern development team seems to be focused on bringing the world back into World of Warcraft. Right now we're on the 10th expansion, and most of the old world is still experiencing the Cataclysm as if it just happened. The next expansion, Midnight, will be revamping several locations in the old world that have needed some love for a while, and I'm convinced that a significant portion, if not the whole world, will be modernized over the next couple of years as well. This loss of connection with the whole world of Azeroth is, I think, why classic vanilla WoW is so popular and so fondly loved. After all, it can be argued that the main character of any MMO is the world. Players want to feel like it's a real place that they're visiting when they log in. Speaking of Classic though, Classic WoW continues to thrive alongside retail with a massive dedicated player base and a lot of great content to choose from. The current Classic community does seem a little bit fractured at the moment given how many different versions of Classic World of Warcraft there are now. The original Classic servers that started in 2019 have recently advanced from Cataclysm into the Mists of Pandaria expansion, and the Classic Anniversary servers will be progressing from Vanilla into the Burning Crusade expansion later this year. But on top of those, we still have the Vanilla Era servers, Classic Hardcore servers, and the servers for the recently concluded Season of Discovery. If you're unfamiliar with that one, Season of Discovery, or SOD for short, was an experimental version of Classic WoW that introduced a ton of new things to Classic, primarily in the form of runes that transform the way each class plays by adding abilities that never existed in vanilla WoW before. Mages could be healers, rogues and warlocks could be tanks. Pretty much every DPS spec was made not only viable, but unique and powerful through these runes. It was great. We progressed through Season of Discovery in phases that introduced new things like PvP events, level up raids where a dungeon like Nomergon was converted into a full raid experience with more difficult mechanics and improved loot drops, and we got different hard modes in endgame raids to compensate for how powerful players became with their runes. They even introduced 2 new dungeons and an entire raid tier called the Scarlet Enclave that I had a ton of fun progressing through with my guild. It's still available for people to play, but since there's no longer updates that are happening for it, the season part has pretty much come to a close, and while the servers aren't going anywhere, the population drop-off has been significant. That doesn't change the fact that when it comes to Classic WoW, SOD is actually the thing that excites me most for the future. Yes, Season of Discovery's development cycle has ended, but its success has led us to a point where it looks like Blizzard are almost certainly developing a more permanent Classic Plus version of WoW. Since the success of Classic WoW in 2019, there has been an ever-increasing call for Blizzard to follow the example of old-school RuneScape and build off of the vanilla WoW experience instead of progressing into the Burning Crusade expansion. Season of Discovery looks a lot like a test run for this concept. By making it a seasonal game mode, Blizzard had a lot of leeway to make some pretty out-there decisions in SOD to see how they played out without breaking a continuous version of the game if something doesn't quite work out. In the end, SOD did eventually start to feel like a digression from Classic WoW gameplay-wise, and in my opinion, what I'd like to see in a true Classic Plus is a lot more subtle class changes that make less viable specs competitive in endgame raids without turning everyone into superhuman god-level beings. I'd like to see additional zones become available to quest through like Hyjal and maybe even visit places like Kultiras in a time-appropriate setting. Enough of my rambling though. There's a point I'm trying to make about Classic Plus, and it's that now more than ever, I believe it's currently in development as we speak. It seems almost inevitable based on all the context clues, and on top of that, more recently, we've seen confirmation that Blizzard is at least gathering data on what players would want in a Classic Plus game mode. At this point, I believe it's confirmed that this survey is real, and it asks a bunch of questions about a hypothetical new version of WoW Classic. I'm not expecting an official acknowledgement or announcement from Blizzard for at least a year. I think it makes sense that they need time to hammer out the details and figure out what direction they want to take, but I have a feeling we'll be seeing more surveys like this go out between now and BlizzCon in 2026. Another point I want to make, and I'll be brief since I feel like this video is already getting too long, is in regards to the most recent Classic WoW release with Mists of Pandaria. I think it's encouraging to see the devs making changes and doing their best to correct some perceived mistakes that were made when MoP was current content. For example, LFR has been a long criticized feature in WoW for desocializing the raiding scene, and this time around they aren't introducing it at all in Classic MoP. Instead, the gear that would have dropped in LFR has been reworked into higher difficulty dungeons called Celestial Dungeons. They did something similar with Cataclysm as well. They're also introducing brand new never before seen mounts, and well, in a sense you could say that they're practicing their Classic Plus development by making some of these changes. I think it would be really interesting if they continue to release classic versions of every expansion to see what they could do with, let's say, Warlords of Draenor to Classic Plus it. I know there were rumors of an entire raid tier and a capital city that was cut content, and it'd be interesting to see what changes could be made to fix the garrison problem in that expansion. Actually, I think this might be an interesting topic for another video, so I'll just leave my speculation there. Anyway, before I start rambling again, I think these are all some pretty solid reasons for why I'm optimistic about the future of World of Warcraft, both retail and classic versions of the game. If I had to make a prediction for what the game is going to look like, let's say 5 years from now, I think we'll see retail in a much healthier place with a full baseline reset and world revamp having taken place. For Classic, I think they'll continue to progress through at least the Legion expansion, and we'll have an old school RuneScape style Classic Plus that introduces new content to the old world building upon vanilla WoW instead of starting fresh with new expansions. Am I just huffing the copium, as the kids say? Probably a bit, yes, but even if my idealized scenario doesn't work out, World of Warcraft is currently experiencing an upward trend in overall quality, variety, and consistency. I'm not saying you need to come back to WoW right now or else you'll regret it, but as a longtime fan, I've been having more fun in WoW than any other game right now, and that's something I thought I'd never feel again. I'm having a blast casually playing retail, leveling a character in Anniversary, and checking out MoP Classic with my guildmates from Season of Discovery. So is it worth coming back to WoW right now in 2025? You all know my answer is yes, but you might disagree, and that's okay too. Not sure how you made it this far in the video if that's the case, but I appreciate the view either way. Let me know in the comments what you think about the future of Classic WoW, Retail WoW, Classic Plus, or whatever else is on your mind. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe for more content, and until next time, see ya.